Hello and welcome to BattleTech Faction Briefings. Today, we continue our time in the Capellan Confederation by looking at a very unique unit. If you ignore the 4th Tau City Rangers, that is. They were once part of the SLDF, then became a mercenary force, and finally, a house military unit. Today, we are discussing the 15th Dracon Regiment. Their SLDF emblem was a 6-point star, similar to a sheriff's star, with the Roman numeral 60 in the middle. Once they became a mercenary force, their emblem was changed to a badge design with a circle holding a symbol inside it, and the number 15 near the bottom. Upon joining the Capellan military, they would have two symbols. Their Citizens Honored design uses a triangle of Dao swords with a tiger in the middle as their emblem. It is a callback to Han Dynasty symbolism, meaning strength. The unit emblem is a red triangle, surrounded by gray and yellow stripes with an orange border. It is done to represent their Star League unit origins, taking the red triangle and coloration, but giving it a modernized look. They use a gray and green color scheme from their early days with the SLDF until their destruction in the Word of Blake War. They also use hash marks for their kills. On mechs, they paint them on their arms, and on vehicles, they are painted on the sides. This is done to show off the skill they have as warriors. The 15th Dracon Regiment has a long history that dates back to the Star League. If you want to skip spoilers, then go to the time listed. The origins of the 15th Dracon Regiment began all the way back with the Star League Defense Force. The 15th Dracon would be established in 2764 as part of the 60th Corps, 5th Army of the SLDF. The soldiers of this regiment would come from Gifu and Relavau. Both worlds were historically controlled by the Capellan Confederation. Their first deployment was in District 1 inside the Capellan Confederation. The 60th Corps would be set to guard the border between the Confederation and Free Worlds League, as well as the Capellan border with the Federated Suns. Their main base was on Kashila. Due to their large area of defense, their troops were spread thin, but they did their best to maintain peace along the border. When the war broke out in the periphery in 2765, the 5th Army would get shifted away from Capellan District 1 to guard the border with the periphery regions in Capellan District 2. When the Americivil War broke out in 2766, the 5th Army would join the fight with Alexander Kerensky. The 60th Corps would be joining the other SLDF troops in the Hegemony campaign. When the Civil War ended and Alexander Kerensky decided to leave the Inner Sphere, the 15th Dracon would choose to stay behind to help protect the Inner Sphere. In 2784, they would be reformed into a mercenary unit and maintain their original name of the 15th Dracon. They would take a contract with the Capellan Confederation as their troops mostly came from that region. They would be stationed on Bhaktapur as the war broke out. They would not be involved in any major conflicts in the early days of the war. In 2795, the Capellan Confederation began a campaign to capture the world of Chesterton. The plan involved capturing the worlds that surrounded Chesterton in order to cut it off from potential reinforcements. The 15th Dracon would be one of a number of mercenary forces that were brought in to assist in this planet-capturing campaign. The 15th would assault Tawas and capture the world in 2797. They faced minor defenses made up of an ad hoc military force. 3 years later, an AFFS counterattack would recapture the world for the Federated Suns. By the end of the war, they would be stationed on Mirak, a world captured during the Chesterton campaign. They would have to defend the world in 2810 during a Federated Suns counterattack. The 15th, alongside several other CCAF units, were able to hold the world over a 2-year-long period of counterattacks. By the end of the war, the 15th Dracon would be down to 34% effective. By the beginning of the war, the 15th Dracon Regiment would be built up to 101% effective. In the interwar period, they were able to recruit new troops from the many units shattered during the First Succession War. They would be stationed on Ingris, a former Terran hegemony world. However, by the end of the war, they would be beat down to 52% effective due to damage taken trying to hold the border during the war. After recovering, the 15th Dracon would be set as border defense, but would occasionally go out for raids across the border. they would battle the Oriente Hussars on Talitha in 2901, where they stormed in for a successful raid. They would face the Hussars again on Irian in 2920, where they would complete another successful raid. They would be part of the defense of Hezen in 2934. The Atrean Dragoons would attempt to take the world and its valuable water supply. The 15th Dracon would be working with McGregor's armored scouts and McCrimmon's light cavalry. One of the standout mech warriors was Lieutenant Martin Davis, who used a catapult to hold back an enemy force with long-range missiles and jump jet maneuvering. The efforts of the mercenaries would lead to a victorious defense of Hezen. After the Battle of Hezen, they would recover and begin raiding the Free Worlds League once again. They would capture a battalion of the Free Worlds League guards in 2940 on Park Place. They would deep raid to the world of Lancaster in 2950. This would be the only time this world would be attacked by the Capellan Confederation. By this point, their raids had earned them quite the reputation. More than that, they would donate part of their spoils to the local governments of the worlds they garrisoned. This helped build a positive connection with the locals and set them apart from other mercenaries. However, these actions would cause the Maskarovka to question if the 15th Dracon are potential subversives. They quickly learned that was not the case. The 15th Dracon would be stationed on Lincoln 5 in order to recover after all their raids big and small. The world had been recently taken by the Confederation, and the 15th arrived just in time for a Federated Suns counterattack. They would hold the world, and afterward, they would also help protect Gon Singh from a raid by the Free Worlds League, where Conan Davis would use his family's catapult to solidify his position in the unit, and as part of his family's legacy. The 15th Dracon Regiment would take a contract from the Draconis Combine in 3020. They would capture the world of Beta Menze 5 from the Federated Suns. They would also defend the world from several counterattacks, the last of which was done by McKinnon's Raiders of the 7th Crucius Lancers, aka the Fox's Teeth. The efforts of the 15th were so impressive that the coordinator would gift them a new mech every year on the anniversary of the conquest of Beta Menze. Takashi Kurita would continue to give them a new mech even after their contract was over. Their good relationship with the Draconis Combine would be a reason the Combine would offer a contract to the Wolf's Dragoons. Even after the declaration of death to mercenaries, the 15th would still receive their gift mechs every year because they were seen as honorable mercenaries. In 3025, they would take up a contract with the Capellan Confederation once again. After all their fighting, they would be down to only 2 battalions. Each of these battalions would be stationed on different worlds. The first would be on Bellatrix, and the second would be on Decatur. They would hold their positions on Bellatrix and Decatur as the Federated Suns invaded the Capellan Confederation. They would be used as guards, just in case the Federated Suns' forces moved deep enough into Capellan territory. After the war ended, they would be moved to Gunthar as a whole unit, due to worries that the growing military forces of the Magistry of Canopus and Duchy of Endurian would pose a threat to the Confederation. The 3rd Canopian Fusiliers would arrive on Gunthar. The commander of the Fusiliers, Major Wilhelm Archal, would attempt to bribe the 15th into abandoning the world. This would be seen as an insult due to their SLDF heritage and loyalty to the people of the Confederation. Thus, the 15th Dracon would conduct a night attack to quickly end the fight. They would destroy a company of shutdown mechs and a large amount of ammo and supplies before the Canopian dropships opened fire on the raiding team. The 15th would pull back, and the Fusiliers would dig in. This would lead to a stalemate. The Canopians would hide by their dropships and occasionally conduct small strikes against the 15th. Meanwhile, the 15th were still down to 2 battalions. Thus, a frontal assault was out of the question. Instead, they used probing attacks to find a weakness in the Fusiliers' defenses, while the Fusiliers waited for reinforcements to arrive. This game of small attacks and heavy defense would go on for 2 years, as both sides realized reinforcements were not coming. After the Capellans made gains and took back several of their worlds, both forces would get more aggressive. The Fusiliers desperate for a win, and the 15th motivated by Confederation victories. By June, the Fusiliers would get a withdrawal order, but the 15th would not let them escape unbloodied. The 15th Dracon would rush in and capture 2 dropships. The Fusiliers would have to cram in as many people and as much equipment as they could into their remaining dropships, then destroy what they couldn't take before fleeing the world in disgrace. Despite moderate losses from the drawn-out Battle of Gunthar, the 15th Dracon would head out to assist with the defense of Renown in 3033. They would face no other major battles for the remainder of the war. In 3038, the 2 battalions of the 15th would be divided up on guard duty once again. The first was on Ares, while the second would be stationed on Necromo. They were able to use the salvage they gained from the Fusiliers to start building up to 4 understrength battalions. As the war began, the Capellan Confederation would not initially be involved. During this time, the expanded 15th Dracon Regiment would be garrisoned on 4 different worlds, the first remaining on Ares, and the second would remain on Necromo. The new third would go to Capricorn III, and the fourth would go to New Sagan. The second FedCom RCT would attack Ares in August 3039 as part of a retaliation for various Capellan border strikes. The 1st Battalion was overwhelmed and destroyed. The local military and factory defense forces were no match for the very powerful FedCom forces. The only local defenders to give them any trouble was a group of locally produced heavy armor vehicles. After 18 days, the other 3 battalions of the 15th Dracon stormed in to avenge their fallen brothers. They would fight hard, but the 2nd FedCom was well positioned and had captured the factories. The arrival of Kingston's Legionnaires 2.5 weeks later would give the 15th the boost they needed to properly fight back. The 2nd FedCom would choose to leave as the tables turned. They stole 2 Union and 2 Overlord-class dropships, dozens of mechs and tanks, and as many other supplies as they could take. Before going, they disabled the factories to ensure the Capellan war machine wouldn't be able to continue their efforts from Ares for a while. Despite the Pyrrhic victory and the months required to repair the factories, the world had been held by the Capellans. It would take some time, but a new 1st Battalion would be built in the early 3040s. By 3050, they would be up to 4 full-strength battalions, the largest their forces would ever become. However, the 3rd and 4th Battalions were made up of green troops due to their lack of combat experience. Each battalion would remain on their previously garrisoned world, the 1st on Ares, the 2nd on Necromo, the 3rd on Capricorn III, and the 4th on New Sagan. Their garrison assignments were mostly uneventful as the Inner Sphere was focused on the clans. Operation Guerrero would take back many worlds for the Confederation in 3057. The 15th Dracon were only used as a garrison force during this short war. They would be stationed on the worlds of Old Kentucky and Chomdo, both of which had been taken back during Operation Guerrero. Due to their loyalty and skill, they would be one of the few mercenary units that would be brought into the CCAF as part of the Citizens Honored Brigade in 3060. This was an act by Sun Tzu Liao to expand their military forces with mercenaries who had proven loyal to the Confederation. Despite this improvement in status, the 15th still maintained their traditions of providing a part of their spoils to the worlds they were garrisoning. However, the Capellan government would start using this as a propaganda tool to show the benevolence of the Capellan military. The 15th Dracon Regiment would continue their guard work with the occasional light raids from the world of Gifu, one of the home worlds of their original founders. As threats from the Free Worlds League grew in the mid-60s, they would be positioned on the League Confederation border, alongside the 4th Tau City Rangers, who were also members of the Citizens Honored Brigade. Their station would include the worlds of Ingersoll and Exodor. As the Word of Blake War loomed on the horizon, the 15th Dracon would be transferred to Eom by 3067. The Federated Suns would attack in 3068, so a Capellan counterattack was started after an orbital strike on Cyan. The 15th Dracon would join in on Operation Thunderstrike as part of the second wave of the counterattack. They would be sent to support the heavily damaged Warrior House Ijori on Overton. Warrior House Ijori had been fighting the 1st Federated Suns Lancers for a long time, and the world was effectively held by the Federated Suns. The 15th would arrive and deal heavy damage to the 1st Fed Suns. Their victory would come at a heavy price, as both Warrior House Ijori and the 15th Dracon Regiment would be effectively destroyed. While Warrior House Ijori would be rebuilt, the 15th Dracon would be disbanded. It is unknown what happened to their forces, but it is possible they were integrated into Warrior House Ijori, as the Warrior House was able to be fully rebuilt by the mid-3070s. There are many former SLDF units that became mercenaries, many of which have long and distinguished careers. The 15th Dracon stand out due to the way they treated their garrison worlds and defending their positions, even if it cost them greatly. Their end came too soon, and it is a shame that they will never be rebuilt. There are many notable pilots amongst the mech warriors of the 15th Dracon Regiment. Robert Madsen, the commander of the 60th Corps. He specialized in technology. He would help develop improvements to network security and targeting systems for the SLDF. He would see his troops through the Americivil War. His fate after the war is unknown, but it is very likely he would have joined Jerome Blake due to his technical expertise. Samuel Shimosa, the commander in the late Third Succession War. He would continue to maintain the standards that had been set by their SLDF origins. This would include acts of charity and making good relations with the Draconis Combine, despite being a mercenary unit. He would retire after the Fourth Succession War. Jean Rosenberg. She was part of the unit during their time in the Draconis Combine. She would become the commander after Colonel Shimosa retired. During her time, the unit would become a house military force as part of the Citizens Honored Brigade. She would pilot a Crockett, then a Hatamoto Chi in 3039, and finally a Grand Dragon in 3050. Rei Suba, the last commander of the 15th Dracon. She would take over in the early 3060s, when the unit was moved to the League Confederation border. She would hold the team together, but would meet her death in the Battle of Overton in 3069. Sean Phillips. He was orphaned in the Battle of Lincoln 5 by Davian troops. He would be picked up and trained by the 15th. He began as a mechanic and built his own hunchback out of spare parts. He would also become a skilled mech warrior. He pilots a heavily modified hunchback. Conan Davis, a legacy of the 15th. His father died in battle, and Conan took his father's mech and began fighting with great skill. Despite some quirks to the mech, from damage it had taken over several generations, he was able to make a name for himself with his hit and move maneuvering as part of the Heavy Recon Lance. He pilots a catapult. Jared Weymouth, a captain who led his team in a key battle on Beta Mensae 5. His team stumbled across a squad from the Fox's Teeth and would be able to hold an important pass while buying time for reinforcements to arrive. He piloted an archer. Shihao Liao, a distant member of the Liao family. Her parents were traveling doctors, and she saw the plight of the people as she visited various worlds. Her desire to help others would make her a perfect fit for the 15th Dracon. She piloted a Cyclops. Jace Cartwright, a Sungwei who was part of the attack on Overton in 3069. He would fight with distinction, and upon losing his mech, Jace would lead local forces in the liberation of their world. He would survive the battle as one of the last members of the 15th Dracon. He piloted a Marauder II. The 15th Dracon Regiment would attempt to use as many mechs from the Star League era as they possibly could. However, they would also use any advanced mechs provided to them by the Draconis Combine or Capellan Confederation. By the 3060s, they would have 1/3 of their mechs up to Star League era standards, and a handful of Inner Sphere Omni-mechs. They have a strong reputation due to their donation of a portion of their spoils of war. From 3018 to their destruction, every commander of the 15th Dracon would earn the Liao Sunburst of Gallantry and the Order of the Legion of Liao. Each of the battalions has a unique build and strategy. The first is built around speed, using heavy, medium, and light mechs. They use their speed to encircle their enemy before taking them down. The second uses heavy and assault mechs, as they are the hammer of the unit who focuses on heavy firepower. The third is balanced in terms of weight class, but tends to only have 2 companies. They function as support. The 4th Battalion has a main attack company and 2 recon companies. They are notable for having skilled engineers who keep their units well maintained and optimized with new tech. By the 3060s, they would have a wing of fighters called Echo Flight. They were made up of former Capellan military pilots. They also had 2 battalions of infantry called the Dragons. This formation included a company of battle armor, a company of artillery, a company of security forces, and VTOL transport and spotter support. The infantry would often work as shock troops and be used to distract enemy mechs before the Dracon mechs would move in for the kill. The 15th would avoid fighting in cities at all costs in order to prevent collateral damage. They would develop tactics to quickly deploy outside of a city when defending a world. Oftentimes, they would use ambush tactics and the occasional flanking or pincer maneuver to defeat their foes. They were also good at playing defense when necessary and forcing the enemy to fight in terrain that the Dracon troops were familiar with. Their standards of skill and tactics would help them survive hundreds of years of war. It is surprising that I could not find any fiction focused on the 15th Dracon. However, there are many sourcebook entries, some of which go quite in depth. This also includes older TRO entries. Bear in mind that some of these books only have formation and location data. I came across the 15th Dracon when I was looking up different mercenaries that had SLDF roots. While the Iridani Light Horse gets quite a bit of fame, there are many others who have just as much claim to the standards that came with their history. Except the Black Warriors, they became pirates. I think the 15th Dracon do live up to the standards set by their ancestors, as they work to better the worlds they garrison as well as hold true to their ideals as they defend the Capellan Confederation, and Draconis Combine for 5 years. I do recommend painting up a set. In fact, I'm tempted to do so myself after working on this video. While they are wiped out in 3069, they have hundreds of years of history, and even fought in the Ameris Civil War. If you like the earlier eras of BattleTech, much like I do, then they are a great addition to your collection. Next time, we will be going to the periphery, with a video focusing on the 3rd Canopian Fusiliers. Odd, I feel like I was just talking about them. After that, we will discuss the 6th Legio, a Myrian Hegemony unit. Then, in July, my secret project will be released. Here's a hint for those of you who are looking forward to the next stage in BattleTech faction briefings. Thank you for watching. May your weapons stay hot and your reactors stay cool. Please take some time to like and subscribe, as that really does help my channel. In addition to that, you can check out more BattleTech faction briefings on the handy playlist. Until we meet again, I'm the Dapper Bard, and I'll see you at the tavern.